Match of the year in the books. Welcome into Six Rotations alongside Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman, and as always, we're brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. Mick, Devaney was packed. Last week, we kind of went over a lot of the X factors in this matchup. We also highlighted some of the non-ranked standouts. We're going to save that for the end. Folks, we are going to dive deep into this Wisconsin-Nebraska 5-set thriller. If you just woke up from a weekend of slumber, Nebraska takes it at home in 5. It was an unbelievable 5th set. Wisconsin led 12-10. Nebraska finished it on a 5-1 run, won it on a net violation challenge. It was quite anticlimactic, but aside from that, Mick, the match lived up to every single speck of hype and hope, and it was so fun to watch here as we sit on October 23rd.
Well, it was an interesting match, I'll have to say that. And from a coaching standpoint, looking at it from a coach, you cannot believe that Nebraska could make 44 hitting errors and still win the match. That is the most unbelievable stat that I've seen.
All right, here we go. They're going to rematch on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, in the UW Fieldhouse. But as we sit now, Nebraska and the Citadel are our only undefeated teams left in NCAA Division I. Despite being out-hit 217 to 130, despite being outblocked 18-7, what did Nebraska do specifically to try to get little advantages in this match?
Well, I thought about that for a long time, Daniel, and it's you say, wow, they won every statistical category. But I think what happened, and I'm not sure I'm right about this, but I just throw this out here for people to think about. But I think what happened was Nebraska made so many hitting errors, not the 18 stuffs that that Wisconsin performed, but the 24 hitting errors to go with that. Those are 24 or 26 times that Wisconsin never played the ball. They never got a chance to dig it and hit it back at the opponents. And I just felt like they didn't get to play enough. Nebraska either got a point or hit it out of bounds, and Wisconsin just was there for a while. And so it was the strangest game that I've ever watched in that I've never seen so many bombs. I mean, they were swinging away and the ball just went out of bounds over and over and over. And the gives, I mean, that's when you get blocked 5 times per set and you give 5 hitting errors per set, that's 10 points. All right. The other team only has to score 15. And usually most teams are getting 13.5 to 14.5 kills per set and at least an ace per set. So it was really strange. I just thought, I thought the better team, in my opinion, watching, the better team probably did not win. But that's just my opinion.
Well, luckily we'll have 1, maybe even 2 more matchups with these squads. And yes, there was an awesome top 10 matchup in the Pac-12 this weekend. Stanford toppled Oregon in Eugene in 4. There's a great weekend coming up. We'll get to all of that, but it's time to dive deep here. Larry and Emily dominated the call. They did such a great job. The atmosphere was so electric. Wisconsin got back to their 6-2. Devin Robinson was back with MJ Hamill. Robinson and Temi Thomas-Ilara finished with just 10 kills. Sarah Franklin led the way with 17. And for Nebraska, it was a dominant first set for the Huskers. They really led for the majority of that first set before Wisconsin flipped the script and had, what was it? 7, how many blocks did Wisconsin? 12 blocks in one set, Mick, and Wisconsin took it to go 25-17 and then had an epic rally late in the 4th set as the Huskers dropped behind 2-1. But Harper Murray, 14 kills, Batenhorst, 13, and then Merritt Beeson, the Florida transfer, with 21 kills. And Mick, if we look at just the 5th set, there was 1 combined attack error. Wisconsin hit 500 at 9:018. Nebraska hit 545 at 13:122. And it was 12-11. Nebraska had crippling service errors in that 5th set. Wisconsin was 3 points away from the win. And then the Huskers' defense went up a notch. Lexi Rodriguez had a few key digs, and the block was big. There weren't any key blocks in that 5th set, but there was 2 or 3 bangers of swings from Merritt Beeson.
Yeah, that the fifth set was the best set. I thought both teams played at the same time, and it was really fun to see that. They reduced errors. They really competed well. The defense, as you said, was really good. Hitters did not bang into the blockers. They really were smart with their shots, and so that was a treasure at the end of four hard fought sets. Yes.
All right, here are a few of the notes that I wrote down during this broadcast. First off, Andy Jackson versus Carter Booth was just pure, unfiltered sugar. It was like you could just feed it into your veins and just enjoy the matchup of those two middles that just electrocuted the fans. All right, Robinson came back. She was key early, but from the first point, you can kind of feel that the match was going to be a long slog. It was a kind of an ugly first point. Wisconsin went up 1-0. Then you had a loose ball fall in that Wisconsin thought was going to drop out of bounds. This was at 4-4 in the first set, and already there was pandemonium. And then Nebraska goes on a 5-0 run. And this is where a tone gets set in this match that fans are going to talk about for a while, okay? Because at 9-4, we saw a clear touch in the middle. I think it was Jackson or maybe Murray for Nebraska, who got a touch off of the block. They weren't on the block. They were standing at the 10-foot line. Looked like it touched the hand on a swing from Wisconsin at the left side. So the Badgers challenge, and inexplicably, the call stood on the floor. So Wisconsin lost one of their two challenges early in that first set. Then they took another risky challenge at 15-11, but it was in favor of Sheffield. This was one of those situations. You lose challenges. There was almost a little air, right? There was a bit of controversy that was looming over this entire match. Sheffield picked up a yellow card asking for a double in that fourth set, and then had a huge challenge at 18-15. Wisconsin won it. It was 17-all. Then Nebraska lost a challenge, and they were down 22-21. They were out of challenges, 23-all in the fourth. Nebraska went on their run, Mick. It was epic. It was so fun to watch.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty good match for spectators, for sure. I think coaches might have been pulling their hair out, but I tell you what, when you get two high-powered teams, and this is high octane going against each other here, and you get a fan base like that, I thought Wisconsin did a good job in the third set of just taking the fans out of it, and so I don't know. There were a lot of really interesting things that happened. I think people should go back and watch it.
I certainly will be watching that fifth set again. Just the swings of momentum. Obviously, you can't sit and say that the referees cost a team a game, but it certainly was a situation where Wisconsin didn't get a few calls. But then Nebraska, in the same vein, they also lost both of their challenges. So you have to feel like both sides were probably frustrated with the down official in that one. I want to say right now, the net violation at 14-13 in the fifth set was the right call, right? Devin Robinson was in the net. There was no doubt about it, but it just kind of stinks, doesn't it? And it's just one of those things where, if the Big Ten commissioner is on the phone with the down ref in that moment, you just kind of want to keep that match going, don't you? Because you just feel like you'll get an extra 20,000 eyes on the TV when you get a text from a friend saying, hey, it's 15-15 in the fifth set. You got to turn this on. Or, oh my goodness, it's up to 18-18 now. You just, isn't it just, it's just tough. But it was the right call. It just doesn't feel right, doesn't it? It didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like a throwaway timeout challenge. It felt like a Russ Rose challenge there from John Cook instead of a clear touch at the net or a ball that was in or out.
Well, I'm glad we have the replay. I've been in matches where that's not called, and it goes pretty much in favor of the home team when you don't have a review like that, and all those fans are yelling, and the referees are just normal people. They get caught up in the avalanche of excitement for the home team. So I thought that was pretty good. I didn't think Sheffield deserved a yellow. I really have seen worse challenges in a long time. I maybe just would have told him to calm down a little bit, but there were a lot of overreactions, a lot of hard play, a great diving play. I never saw so many women diving for so many balls in my whole life. I thought that was really fun. And then if you go on and look at the officiating in the Oregon Stanford match, I think there must have been 12 or 14 challenges, and the coaches won almost all of them. It was where were the officials in that one? Because both coaches were exasperated. It was just a challenge on every other play, and almost every challenge worked out for the coach that challenged. So it was pretty interesting.
Yep, let's move on into the Pac-12. And with that, we can show you the top 5 for the AVCA TerraFlex coaches poll. Stanford stays put at 3 behind Wisconsin at 2. Stanford, Ruben, and Kip looked like they were going to cruise to a sweep. I think after 2 sets, Ruben and Kip each had 9 or 8 kills, and Stanford was hitting over 250, 300. But Oregon had a huge third set. They blew 4 set points at the end of the third set, but were able to force a fourth on a service error. Stanford's numbers looked like this. The Cardinal were able to hit 281 with 8 aces. Oregon was up there as well. Oregon hit 239 with 8 aces and 7 blocks, and Stanford was led by 17 kills from Kip, 15 from Ruben, 13 from Baird. If those 3 can just stay in the double digits consistently, Mick, and you avoid the high error numbers, if you stay over 200, 220, it's going to be really hard to beat Stanford. But we saw Nebraska do it in a very similar fashion. Meanwhile, Collier, 14 kills. Kara McGee goes 542 in the middle with 15 kills and just 2 errors. And now Oregon, they sit, still kind of saying pat in the top 10. We'll talk about that in a second. Oregon's going to go to Washington State on Friday. Stanford goes to Arizona State on Sunday. Washington State got stunned by USC. So the Pac-12 is really looking like that 2-horse race now at the top.
Well, I'll tell you something. If you look at the stats of the teams, the top 10 teams in the country, Stanford is producing at 19.6 points per set.
Wow.
Nobody else is in the 19s. And guess who's second in production? Oregon at 18.3. Then you have 18.2 Wisconsin, 18.2 Pitt, 18.2 Arkansas. But nobody's producing like those 2 teams. And Washington State is up there, but they're producing only 17.9. And those teams in the 17s, I feel, are going to be in trouble at the end of the day. But boy, Stanford's 19.6 is better than Kentucky's. When the Kentucky won in COVID, they were at 19.2 or points per set, and that's the highest we've seen until Stanford right now is producing 19.6 at this point in the season.
So it feels like a no-brainer that Stanford will probably host once again all the way through the regionals. The question is, will Maples get a crowd? Will Stanford avoid an upset like USD brought to them in the Elite Eight last year? And meanwhile, USD looking like they may go from the Final Four to the NIVC as the West Coast Conference runs through Pepperdine right now. Pepperdine able to stay undefeated in the WCC. They beat USD in 3 sets this weekend, and they beat LMU in 4 sets. But back over here to our top 5, Mick, just 1 match for Texas. They pop up to that 5 spot. They survive TCU in 5 sets. 2 massive matches here to extend that, 70-71 home match conference winning streak, as they'll host Baylor Thursday and Friday at 8 Eastern, Thursday FS1, Friday Longhorn Network. Give me a quick word or 2 about that Texas TCU match.
Well, TCU is sneaky good. Coach Williams really gets them fired up to play the big matches. And, I look for TCU to play Texas really closely, but I think Texas has got too much. Para, who transferred from Texas to TCU, always feels like she's got something to prove. She plays her best against the Longhorns. That was seen, and so it was a great match, and it will be a great match if they play again. But I was going to say one thing about Texas. Texas and Louisville are the same in production right now. And I don't know who's 4th and who's 5th. There's some of the polls that are statistic polls that have Texas 3rd, but I just see Texas and Louisville meeting somewhere in the regionals, because I think one's going to be 5 and one's going to be 4. So it looks to me like that could be the way that's going to go.
Hey, I'm game for that. Meanwhile, we sit right now, Louisville at 4, Texas at 5. And so, we'll talk a little bit more about our Volleyball Magazine Super 16 poll. In that, Louisville is 4, Texas is 5. The same 5 for the AVCA coaches and the media poll, and that's always nice to see. But you mentioned Louisville. Louisville down 2-0 on Friday against Wake Forest. They go 25-15, 25-5, 15-7 to reverse sweep the Demon Deacons, and then drop a set on Sunday against Virginia Tech just to blow out the Hokies. So Louisville continues to dance with fire. They'll host a good Florida State team on Friday, a good Miami team on Sunday.
The thing about Louisville is that we look at Wisconsin and Nebraska, and they're looking forward to playing each other again, and that's about it. You look on the Pac-12, and you've got Washington State versus Stanford. You got Oregon against Stanford again. So you've got some movement around there. But Louisville has got Georgia Tech twice and Pittsburgh once in the last part of the season. They are not comfortable. They have 3 big matches, and 2 of those are in the last weekend.
I'm going to disagree with that point, though, because you mentioned if you finish your year, let's say Louisville finishes their year against NC and Duke and NC State and Wake Forest, they won't be in good form going into the postseason. Meanwhile, they are going to be revved up into shape. Let's say Louisville drops one of those. It's not the end of the world. They will be in a better shape mentally and physically playing against top teams like Pittsburgh, who just swept NC State, like Georgia Tech, who just went out this weekend and beat Duke and UNC. So I do think that I would rather, if I was a team, I'd rather have a backloaded conference schedule, gets you ready a little bit more for the conference tournament, or excuse me, there's no conference tournament there, but for the NCAA tournament. Meanwhile, Mick, the SEC is just going to have good matches every week, it seems. But go ahead, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think my point, though, was that what's critical in those matches is who gets to host regionals.
Right.
That's what's critical. And I'd say that I should have pointed that out, that's really my point, not who's 4th or 5th, but the 4th place team gets to host. And that's a big deal because you're not traveling and you get the home crowd fans.
So meanwhile, let's take a look at our AVCA top 25 here. And the SEC is very present throughout, right? You've got Arkansas, who stays in the top 10. It was their first top 10 ranking last year ever. They went out and beat Tennessee in Knoxville in 4 sets, first time in 9 years, but then turn around and fall to UK on Sunday. The combination, the Wildcats again, jump to the top of the SEC. Kentucky now at 15, Tennessee at 12, Arkansas at 10. You still have Florida and Auburn as well. I see 4 SEC, maybe three, right? Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, all hosting if they continue in this ways. And for Kentucky, they take Aaron Lamb off the bench. She changes that match so intensely. DeLay finishes with 17 kills. You've got Rutherford still as well, dominating the Arkansas block, it felt like, because Gillen and Head had a career high in kills, but Bevan, the libero for Kentucky, had 30 digs. The defense just was too strong for the Wildcats in a 5-set win.
Yeah, I like Kentucky, though. I think they're coming on, with Rutherford in there. I do think you could have 3 SEC teams in the top 16 without, you've got
maybe 4 Florida.
Yeah, you would have 4. And so I think that's more than possible. I think that's pretty good. Arkansas, you've got all those teams are playing in the middle of the pack and playing well enough to host. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Evans got hurt, came back in. They used just 1 serving sub. Mick, did you ever coach a team that you only needed 1 serving sub?
Well, I did at one time, and it was pretty good. We only played about 7 people, so yeah, and we didn't have a libero at that time, so yeah, we did that pretty well. And when you have that, though, you don't want any errors because you usually means you don't have an 8th or 9th player to bring in there. So yes.
So Arkansas will go to Gainesville on Sunday at 1:00 Eastern. That's going to be a huge SEC battle. The SEC. Really, really fun. The Big 12 also dominating again in our poll as we sit and look at BYU at 8 and then down to Kansas at 14. Of course, You've also got Texas up at 5. But, Baylor at 20 and Houston at 22. BYU swept Iowa State twice. Baylor beat UCF in 7 sets this weekend, just dropped 1 set against unbeaten UCF, drops them out of the polls. Kansas took care of that good TCU team on ESPN2, and Houston didn't drop a set against Texas Tech. I think the Big 12 is going to have 4 hosts this year.
That will be interesting to watch. They certainly have the potential to do that because of their numbers. They might get 7 or 8 in the tournament.
Yeah, it did. It happened 2 years ago. I certainly think that they're deserving, especially with all or 3 of the 4 newcomers, right? In UCF, Houston, and BYU, all sitting in very comfortable spots to reach the NCAA tournament. And then you've got teams that are just hoping that a couple of those top 16 fall off. You have Creighton sitting on the outside of that top 16. They swept UConn and Providence. Dayton took care of St. Louis in 7 sets. Dayton will have, if you're just hanging around Tuesday and Wednesday, Dayton matches up with Duquesne at 5 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday and Wednesday as Western Kentucky stays ranked with the win over Sam Houston. Now, Mick, to a few of the upsets, right? Auburn loses to Missouri. Penn State falls to Purdue after the Boilermakers got revenge over Indiana on Wednesday. Florida got revenge over Texas A&M as well. But Arizona State falling to Colorado and then Ohio State falling to Indiana just continues the avalanche for a few of those teams losing to unranked squads.
Yeah, and for sure. And you even had USC taking on Washington State after Washington State got a 2-game
in a reverse sweep. Yeah.
And they were on cruise control and they just quit focusing. And boy, when that happens, you can't get it back sometimes. And SC just rolled to that fifth set win. And that was big and a big error, I thought, for Washington State. But you're right about the others. And, the other one that I was amazed at is Texas A&M, who I thought was playing really well, lost 2 matches this weekend, and JMU, who's ranked really high, lost 2 to Coastal. And in that Sun Belt Conference right now, you got 4 teams that actually are battling to get into the tournament, and Texas State and South Alabama are both good. Texas State taking South Alabama, they were undefeated in conference, so now Texas State's going to take Coastal on. South Alabama is going to take James Madison's on. That's an amazing thing to watch because there are 4 really good teams. And don't forget Troy, the 5th team that's been in there. So they have 5 teams in that Sun Belt Conference that I'm sure many people have not been paying attention to, but the coaching is phenomenal in that conference right now. They have some really good coaches in the top 5 or 6 teams.
Sunbelt looks good. The MAC still dominated by Western Michigan, who's 11-0, 2-match lead over Ball State, with Buffalo leading on the east side of things. The Citadel with a comeback 5-set win against Chattanooga, their 7th 5th set win this year, and the Citadel 22-0. The Citadel reached the NCAA tournament just 3 years ago, and so they're on their way to get back with that auto bid. But of course, you got to win the conference tournament. That's where everything throws into whack. Meanwhile, no conference tournament in the WCC, and Pepperdine, despite going down early to LMU, they stay undefeated, as does UC Santa Barbara, who enter into the poll for the first time this season. Santa Barbara sits at 25. Mick, as we take a look at the weekend ahead, we'll go ahead and show you the Volleyball Magazine Super 16 poll here. And so it's the same 5, pretty much the same top 10 as the coaches poll. And then it gets into a little bit of a flux, right? You still have Florida in there. Penn State I took out, but they up at 13. And Kansas and Dayton stay tied in the 16 spot. I don't know about you. I put Purdue in the top 16 and Baylor in the top 16 over Dayton and Penn State because Purdue beat them head-to-head. But I think USC and Florida State are hanging around that corner. They both got votes.
Yeah, I actually I had Kentucky at 16. I think they've deserved to be in there. I really had Purdue at 17. I don't think they've done the body of work yet to get in the top 16, but I think they're close. They're playing at a very high level right now.
I put Kentucky at 10. Just gonna
Yeah,
say
yeah.
their
So
job. I mean,
you like that. But what I did do is I went back. I said I wouldn't do this, but I went back and put Creighton on the poll after
why not?
I looked at all of the numbers, and their numbers are much better than I thought. And so I've got them back up there. They better not let me down now, because I put them back in the top 16. I see no one else is doing that yet, but I think you better pay attention, and we need to watch the next Marquette Creighton battle, because they got taken to task by
Must
Marquette.
win. Yeah,
The
that's a
first
must
time.
win for
So
Creighton. Plus, of
yeah,
course, the Big East tournament. But Mick, I've got two teams similar to that, Baylor and Georgia Tech, that I put back in that pretty much need to win some big matches. Baylor at Texas. I'm going to be there with you, Mick, on Friday.
yep.
I've never been to Gregory. I can't wait. I teased it last week. That's a big matchup this weekend. But Mick, how about the match on Fox? We will have two volleyball matches for the first time ever on Fox, Fox. Whatever your local Fox is. For me, it's Channel 7. Or used to be when I grew up down in Miami. So you're going to have Packers, Vikings right when that finishes. Minnesota at Wisconsin. Do you think the Gophers, they're sitting at 26 in the AVCA coaches Terraflex poll. Do you think the Gophers have a shot in the UW Fieldhouse? Ohio State, Michigan, the other matchup.
I think it depends on Shaftmaster. If she's healthy, 100%, I think they have a shot. They have the arms to play and beat anybody in the country. What's been going on with them, I have no idea. But if Shaftmaster is healthy, the setter, then they have a chance, and I wouldn't take them lightly. It's like I said, if they're in the RPI poll, they're in the tournament right now still. But who wants to play them in the first or second round? Not me.
Yeah, especially if they're like a 3 instead of being a 2, right? Every single region in the NCAA tournament has a 1, 2, 3, and 4 seed. I feel like they might be doing that garbage seeding again, where the teams are going to be ranked inside the rankings, which always confuses the fans. Just seed them 1 through 16, and we know who the 2 and the 3 and the 4 are in each subsection. You don't need to identify each one with its own ranking. But I'll get off my high horse there. Nebraska is going to stay at home. They'll take on Rutgers and Maryland. But Mick, out to Pac-12ville, one more wrap-up. Washington State beat UCLA after falling to USC. USC was able to escape Washington in a tight one on Sunday. Oregon at Washington State. Do you think they fall in either?
Washington could give them trouble at Washington.
Okay. You never know.
That's a hard place to play. I think what's interesting is Washington had a pretty high ranking, 36 something in the 30s. Even though they started out pretty bad, they've really gotten into it. But now SC has moved forward and gotten ahead of all of those teams. So they're probably right there with Arizona State right now, really, really close to Arizona State, the way they're playing. So that conference is going to have some very good games coming up, teams that are not ranked in the top 16.
Well, you mentioned Arizona State. That's how we're going to finish this up. Arizona State has fallen to now Oregon State and Colorado, but can they revive their season against Stanford this weekend?
Boy, that's a hard one. I just don't think they're equipped to handle 19.6 kills per set, or points per set, not kills, but points. That's hard. Arizona doesn't score at that level. Stanford would have to start hitting balls into the stands like Shrek did that one. That was amazing. I've only seen one other ball go into the stands like that, and I lost a regional on one of those. So I remember that quite well.
Well, that's where we sit. A phenomenal weekend. Now on Sunday, we will have a new top 10 to review next week. So the committee, the NCAA selection committee, will come out with their top 10 again. It'll be curious to see, as you mentioned, who gets the 4, who gets the 5, whether they include some of the matches over the weekend. Of course, there's a big one on Sunday that they probably won't include with Wisconsin and Minnesota and Stanford, Arizona State, but they'll have Oregon, Washington State to mull over. They'll have Texas's 2 matchups. They won't be able to talk about whether Arkansas and Florida, what happens there. That'll be on Sunday, so I don't think it'll count. So I'm curious to see where that sits. As always, we thank you so much for joining us. What a great show. What a great weekend of volleyball. What a great match that was in the Devaney Center. I can't wait for the sequel in the UW Fieldhouse and the last Friday of November. As always, he's Mick. I'm Daniel, and we are Six Rotations.